Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today, I want to talk about the officer pictured here, First Lieutenant John Howard Worcester of the 7th New Hampshire Infantry. He was something of an anomaly among officers in the Union Army or the Southern Army, or really any army at any time in history. He was that rare breed of leader who could socialize with his men without losing his grip on the command of them. A reverend who knew him summed up his character like this: Lieutenant Worcester was just the man the country wanted, firm in his convictions, active and forcible. He was her right arm of strength in her service. And he was. His childhood, though, offers few hints of the man he would become. Born in Hollis, New Hampshire in 1839, by the way, the same year the first successful photography process was announced, Worcester attended public schools and embarked on a law career. But the war interrupted his studies. He was actually on the verge of finishing his homework and his work and becoming an attorney when South Carolina forces bombarded Fort Sumter in 1861. There's a quote in his biographical sketch that sums up his reaction to the war like this, quote, "When the nation summoned its young men to its defense, his love of country and stern sense of duty found in him a prompt response. In the summer of 1861, he enlisted as a private soldier in Company H of the 7th New Hampshire Regiment, and upon its organization was chosen second lieutenant of his company. In June of 1862, upon the resignation of the first lieutenant, Worcester was promoted to his place and was afterwards constantly in the service with his regiment in Florida and South Carolina. In South Carolina, the Palmetto State, Worcester and his comrades were part of the assault on Fort Wagner during the evening of July 18th, 1863. As you students of the Civil War know, that assault was led by the 54th Massachusetts Infantry, commanded by Colonel Robert Gould Shaw. Worcester, according to that biographical sketch, was at the head of his men in Company H and led them to the very top of the parapet of the fort. There, they suffered the same fate as the 54th Massachusetts when they encountered the fort's Confederate defenders, who put up a stiff resistance. At one point, in the din of battle, as the drifts of gun smoke and haze was lit up by flashes of gunfire from muskets, revolvers, and cannon, Worcester cheered his men on when rebel lead severely wounded him in his left leg. Soon after came the order to retreat, but Worcester was unable to leave the field. He remained all night on the battleground. That next morning, Confederates found him, made him a prisoner of war, and transported him to nearby Charleston for medical treatment. Surgeons amputated his left leg on July 19th and 6 days later returned him under a flag of truce to the Union base at Hilton Head. Safely in Union hands, medical personnel put him on board a vessel to be sent north with other wounded soldiers to recuperate. He didn't make it. The writer of that biographical sketch tells us what happened next. That night, while the vessel was making preparations to leave, the gangrene struck his limb, and before morning he breathed his last. When he found he could not live, he calmly resigned himself to his fate and said to a wounded comrade lying at his side, "Give my love to my men and say to them that I shall be with them no more, and tell my friends at home all you know of me." Worcester was all of 24 years old. His remains were taken off the boat and buried at Hilton Head under a military escort. Word was sent home to his grief-stricken family. They had his remains disinterred, taken to Hollis, and buried in the family cemetery. At his interment in Hollis, a minister spoke these words: Lieutenant Worcester was just the man the country wanted, firm in his convictions, active and forcible. He was a right arm of strength in her service. Nature had fitted him for a popular and successful officer. His form was large and commanding. He had a happy faculty of mingling with his men freely and socially, and yet maintaining a complete command of them. It was a command not common in the army, that of respect and love. He endeavored to make the most of his men by increasing their virtues. His counsel and example were always against the use of intoxicating drinks, tobacco, profanity, and gambling, and he knew how to urge his views upon others without giving offense. Another person, the surgeon of the 7th New Hampshire, Dr. Henry Boynton, left behind this memory. No officer in the regiment was before Lieutenant Worcester in promise. He was a general favorite with officers and men, and no one whose lot it was to fall on that fatal night was more universally lamented. Another officer, lieutenant, to whose place Lieutenant Worcester was promoted, in a short obituary notice said of the lost soldier, Lieutenant Worcester, in the discharge of every duty, was faithful and persevering. No effort was too great for him if he could benefit the condition of a private soldier or serve a friend. Such honesty, such fidelity, such energy, and such kindness won for him the high esteem of all who knew him. His character was unexceptionable, his habits strictly temperate, his principles unwavering, his service short, faithful, and earnest is ended. But his example still lives and will be felt so long as a remnant of his company shall survive. It is perhaps no surprise that after the war, when veterans in Hollis established a post of the Grand Army of the Republic, they named it after Worcester. So it is written, quote, from an affectionate and respectful regard for his memory, end quote. So there you have it, the story of Lieutenant Worcester of the 7th New Hampshire Infantry. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.